Hello, what's happening? How'd you like those 4 dark videos I made yesterday? That's what happens when you have too many um, DSLRs hanging out and you grab the wrong DSLR to make a video. Yeah, that was pretty embarrassing. I went with it anyway. Today we're going to be reviewing, or I'm going to be reviewing. It's like we're going to be reviewing. What does that actually mean? We're going to be reviewing. I'm going to be reviewing the Zeiss 100mm macro planar. It's an f2 lens. It's incredibly expensive. I'll be talking about some points because I have to address them in referring to the attributes of this lens. Talk about micro contrast, and I'll be discussing what micro contrast is in the next video after this. Here in the next few days, of course, more photography videos, but also some videos for some other people, videos I was making a long time before I was making photography videos, talking about field theory. Of course, really nobody's interested in field theory, for good reason. It's kind of like someone listening to old dead people poetry, and it's amazing how advanced we are technologically, although we're ultimately not that advanced, but that we think we're so smart and yet we know nothing about the universe. I mean, we grow up with the idea that the light is emitted from things, and that's an absolute absurdity. And just like these little glow stick wands, or like a light bulb, for example. I mean, we think that light bulbs are like these glow sticks actually emit light, and they don't emit light. I mean, it's a completely atomistic, physicalist principle of the universe, and it's like your camera is a light net. You know, instead of a fish net, you've got a net for catching light. And it's a complete absurdity. There's no such thing as photon particles. I mean, it is a field perturbation, and fields are not particles. I mean, wireless power induction in an absolute vacuum, or light transmission, these are not physical entities whatsoever. So we suffer as humanity under a sick delusion that we will recover from. Who knows if it's 100 years or 150 years from now, but I digress, obviously so. Someone's going to go, downvote, downvote! Whatever. You're supposed to have a curiosity about the nature of light. I mean, it's called photographia, writing with light. You would think that some photographers might actually be interested in the nature of light, because light are not little photon particles striking, your sensor and passing through your lens. It is a field perturbation. Okay, the speed of which is only limited by the transverse induction of electromagnetism by its very nature. There is no such thing as a speed of light. It is only the rate of induction at which something can occur. And anything that has transverse reciprocations is phenomenalized, and therefore has a max rate of induction, which is a known entity of the speed of light. Anyway, let's start talking about the Zeiss. Yeah, I digress there, right? Start talking about this wonderful lens. It's absolutely exquisite. Let me take the lens hood off of it here. This is the Carl Zeiss 100mm macro planar. It's an f2 lens. It's 9 elements. It's 16.7 inches minimum focusing distance. Unlike our Tachina over here, which like a bazillion of you bought off my recommendation, and everybody's happy with that, and I've got a couple of them myself, and it's back ordered everywhere. This is an exquisite lens with 1:1 reproduction ratio. This is a 1:2, so it can't step up to the Kina in the reproduction ratio. So you have to ask yourself, well, what the hell are you doing, talking about this lens that costs a hair over 4 times as much as the Tachina, $400 versus $1,540 here. And it's also manual focus, and the throw on it is, as you see here, incredibly long. Let's keep throwing the lens. There we go. We reached its max, so there it is. It's made in Japan. It's a Carl Zeiss. It's a macro planar. So what differentiates this from the Tachina, or what as a portraiture lens differentiates this from like the 105mm f2 DC Nikkor? I mean, you're saying yourself, or yelling at me, you've got the 105mm Nikkor. Why on earth, other than gear acquisition syndrome, and I don't suffer from that regardless of the fact that I have a ton of lenses, I don't suffer gear acquisition. I don't hoard lenses for the sake of hoarding lenses, or just, I don't. I know a lot of you people think that, but I don't. I do have too many lenses and too many camera bodies, but my experience also helps you, and I try to be completely objective to the absolute best of my ability in making empirical observations about these lenses, so nobody wastes their money. I cringe at the thought that I give subjective information and somebody out there wastes their money, so I'm not into that. Yeah, 1.5 pounds is the actual weight of the lens. Let's start talking about the pros of the lens. It's got segmented separation in both shallow and far depth of field, so the rendition on this is incredible. It is ultimately, of course, there's no aspherical elements in this. There's no ED doped glass in this. The micro contrast on this lens is absolutely incredible. It blows the hell out of the 105mm DC Nikkor, which is an exquisite lens, by the way. And I just recently told you it does have the best bokeh, and of course it absolutely does. I compared it against this lens. This lens has incredible bokeh, but I mean any good 100mm should have incredible bokeh. The Tokina 100mm has very good bokeh. I would call this incredible bokeh. There's in the 100mm range, you've got a lot of lenses with excellent bokeh. This has exquisite bokeh. The 105mm DC Nikkor has interstellar bokeh. So this is right up there in the absolute upper class of the 1% as far as bokeh. Yeah, right, second or third, depending on how subjective you are and what sort of bokeh that you like. But what makes this lens so exquisite, and what sort of downsides does it have? Because it has exquisite micro contrasting, and I'll be talking about that in the next video. This lens is used as a portrait lens or a walk around, even a landscape lens. Yeah, 100mm is perfectly valid landscape lens. Used in black and white to get the micro contrast of, like, say, a pile of wood or something with very low contrast. Like, even though this is modeled color on this tabletop, you have minimum contrast and tonal range here, but you have infinite number of tones between the light grays and the dark grays, and a bad lens will actually make this look muddy, whereas this will actually make it pop. So it does an exquisite job and saturational pop of the micro contrast of what it is you're shooting over any other 100mm macro lens out there, or even the 105mm DC Nikkor. The cons of this lens, is manual focus. If you don't have the skills to use this lens, there's several ways this lens will spank you right in the ass, and it will frustrate you, even though it will produce images that are absolutely exquisite, which is why I own the lens. It will spank you. It is unforgiving on your nescience, your agnosis on not only manual focus, but also in how it captures the image if you are stupid or clumsy. This lens almost begs the use of a monopod, even in bright light. If you want to get something serious, you're going to shoot some portrait shots or something, at the very least a monopod. That's not to say I can't pack this around by hand and shoot with it all day long. You can. Of course, it has no vibration control, and of course it is a manual focus lens. And it is a fast lens, f2 lens, but at f2, if you can start cranking down at f2, 2.8 on this lens, you got to have some serious skills, not only in manual focusing, and this is exquisitely smooth in manual focusing, but also keeping it there and your hand-holding techniques for use of it with the narrow depth of field, because otherwise this lens will spank you. This is one of the few lenses that I have to say, it's like, well, what the hell does that mean? It's a professional lens. Well, it's a professional lens because it's a Zeiss and it's expensive. That's not what I mean at all. I'm saying it's a professional lens, and that if you don't know how to have the skills, you'll have to train yourself or have the skills, and training yourself isn't that difficult. This lens will just flat out spank you. It's kind of like what I would deem a slow perfection with exquisite grace. I mean, it's not the Tokina where you could whip it out and autofocus, boom, 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 get all these awesome portrait shots, and this lens, you're all happy with this lens. I mean, I've got two of them for a reason. And I said this lens is 4 times as much. What does this have that the Tokina doesn't have? Now, I'm not putting down the Tokina, so I mean, nothing has changed on the Tokina. I mean, I've had this lens now for quite a long time. I mean, I'm not like saying, oh, surprise, you're something that supersedes Tokina, because nothing supersedes Tokina. It's in its own class. What I'm saying is that what this lens has in micro contrast, what it will deliver for depth rendition and especially micro contrast, is off the scale. It it is the absolute tits. Obviously, with a 1:2 reproduction ratio, the Tachina spanks it. So it's, but it is still a perfect little macro lens, and of course you have no autofocus, so you're going to have skills, and if you don't know how to treat her, this lens is a prissy little girl. Oh, I shouldn't say that. This lens is a prissy little Paris Hilton lens, and it will definitely treat you badly if you don't treat it in its use, both manually focusing it and understanding how it actually segments out the separation both fore and aft on the depth of field. It will spank you and it will give you bad results. But if you treat this lens right, it will give you interstellar results. Therefore, its window of use is very picky, and that is why I would actually call this a professional lens. Not because it's expensive or because it's a freaking Zeiss. It does have its other con. It has a very, very long throw, and it's not heavy at all. It's just insanely heavy. And also, of course, as I said, it's insanely expensive. It does have a bit, if you got a high contrast macro shot, where you have heavy contrast between your depth of field before and after your subject. It has a longitudinal chromatic aberration. You know, it's color fringing on the autofocus highlights, so that's something you have to be careful of. But I mean, this is a low element count lens, and like I said, there's no perfect lens out there. However, the 35mm is, of course, my #1 lens. It is absolute tops, the best lens that I've got, period, and it's like the only lens that I've ever used in my life that has the absolute best properties across the board and isn't lacking in anything. This lens, if you're shooting a high megapixel camera, you know, say 24, of course, 8 years ago would be a very high megapixel camera, so we can still call a 24 megapixel camera a high megapixel camera, but I'm referring specifically to its use on the 36 megapixel D800s or D810s. This lens will shine. But in using it there too, because it is a prissy little girl, and how you shoot with it, both in manual focus and its a separation both fore and after the subject to be focused, f2, 2.8, even 4. It is unforgiving, and it is therefore a professional lens, and it's even more so picky ass on like a Nikon D800 or D810. So if you're going to shoot it on that sort of stuff, or if you got a Canon, the new 50 megapixel one, you got a Canon mount, it's going to be a prissy little girl too, and it's going to fight you until you pet her fur the right way. It seems kind of humorous, but I'm actually being dead serious on how using this lens, if you don't know, if you don't have the skills, it will spank you. And I mean, I do literally mean that, and I'm not the first person to say that either about this lens. It will give you interstellar results that are mind-boggling, but if you don't know how to get it, you don't know how to milk the old cow right, she's not going to give you any milk. I love these southern analogies. So that's it. That's the macro planar 100mm Zeiss. Insanely heavy, incredibly expensive, but it is a true professional lens. Not because it's a Zeiss, not because it's expensive, but because if you don't know how to use it right, or at least teach yourself how to use it right, it will spank you. And I know I repeat myself too much. Oh well, I have faults. Like I said, it is a low element count lens. It's 9 elements. The amazing thing too, the helicoid on this is so exquisite. I can't see it on camera. If I were to take the rear cap off and shine a light in the rear, you can actually see the CNC machined helicoil in the lens barrel as I actually zoom this lens out to its fullest extension, and you can see a big trail of grease in there. But it's not only that, it's the helicoid design of how this is designed. It is just pure silk sex and sugar, and it's exquisite on the inside. And you can also see, oh well, there's the white grease right there. You could stick in a Q-tip, not that I'd recommend you do that, and wob out a big glob of white lubrication grease in the helicoil. But it is perfection, and this lens is, even though it's divinely expensive, it's actually worth every penny. And if you're going to use this as an outdoor portraiture lens, or even a landscape lens, or a cityscape lens, or even a 1:2 reproduction macro lens, the results from this, if you know how to use it right, are nothing short of pure perfection. So anyway, thanks for watching. Catch you later.